All right, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. This is our ongoing civil conversation with Democracy in a Box. And we've called this our 478 conversation because we kind of based it on Rotary's 4-way test and 7 areas of focus and 8 pillars of positive peace. But that's kind of just the backdrop, and that's something we can go back to if we feel like we get off course in the conversation, or we can use Rotary's 4-way test to, hopefully help us resolve anything where we might feel like there's, I don't know, just something we need to dive into more. The 4-way test is 4 questions, and they are, is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Is it beneficial to all concerned? And will it build goodwill and better friendships? And so we feel like, that's a pretty good way to evaluate any kind of policy or really anything that we want to examine. So with that being the starting place, we really want to create an ongoing civil conversation that is enjoyable and meaningful for everyone to attend. We have the, right now we have the theme of sustainability. We're talking a lot about that, but I also want to encourage you to talk about what you really want to talk about. Talk about the, ideally this is a place where you can talk about what you're really passionate about or what you feel is really important to talk about, and maybe the thing that you're not really getting the opportunity to talk about anywhere else. We would love for this to be that space, and it can be related to civics, democracy, or sustainability, all of that, but also it doesn't have to be, because it's kind of our belief that everything is connected to those areas. So if you want to start in a different place, we can probably tie it all together and find the way that we're all connected. So in keeping with this being something that we want to be enjoyable and meaningful for you, definitely let us know. You can talk to me anytime, or you can talk to Dawn. Tell us what you're craving. Tell us what you're wanting. If you feel, just if you feel anything that you like in this conversation, but also if you feel anything that you don't like, if you feel frustrated, or if you feel like you want something else, or you feel bored, we want to create a civil conversation that is really something that you want to come back to. And we hope by it being something that you want to come back to, we can create a civil conversation that a lot of people will want to come back to, because that's really a fundamental block of what we feel we need more of, is civil conversation where people feel welcome and they feel able to speak and able to be heard. And because at the end of the day, whatever issues we might be navigating in our society, or in civic life, or in democracy, it comes back to us communicating and conversing about our feelings, our beliefs, the facts. It comes back to us talking about those things. And this is my feeling about it. It's often about kind of softening our hearts around things that maybe we've had to keep a distance from, and coming together and collaborating, finding consensus. So we want to create a space where people can do that. And also, if you don't maybe this isn't the format for you. Maybe this, what we're doing here doesn't resonate with you. Feel free to reach out to us and let us know what you are craving and what you are looking for, because we might know another organization that's doing that, and we can direct you towards that. Or if you're really, we can possibly create something new with you. If you are craving something, we're like, yeah, there's nothing out there that matches, what you are craving, then let's start it. Let's experiment with it, and let's see if we can get something going. I feel pretty complete with that. Don, would you let me know what I've missed, and share anything that you want?
No, I think you covered it. I've had a couple of really interesting conversations just this last week with some organizations, and the deeper I go, the more I see that there's such a hunger for depolarization and connecting with people within our country, and it's never been more needed. And at last count, I've been kind of doing an informal survey. At last count, I've come up with over 1,000 organizations that are concentrating on depolarization or increasing civic engagement or promoting civility. So with all the bad news, I think that's some good news. I think the challenge there is we all revolve in our little silos, and it's hard to branch out. So I think that's maybe one of the things we can offer, is that by doing small groups and one-on-one, we can recruit more people that see that it's not quite as hopeless and they're not quite as alone as they think they are.
Yeah, I think there's a real hunger for depolarization. I mean, I hear on podcasts people that I find fascinating, but they can be a cynical, they can be acerbic a little bit, and they're hungering for it, and they just don't know how to get there. And they try, but they're firmly on the left. Perhaps I'm going to come out and say I'm a little bit on the left myself, and so they've already got their stated position staked out, and so they feel like they can't do anything about it in a way, or they're just like, I don't know how we're going to get out of this. I think this is a possible way to get out of this.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah,
I was,
Mike.
oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, just thank you, Mike. I really agree with that. Go ahead, Don.
I was just, I have, Darren passed on to me a link. There was an article on CNN.org about humanlibrary.org. And that is I think that is just a brilliant idea. Check it out if you get a chance. And where they pair up, it's one-on-one 30-minute conversations with, and it's essentially with other people, and you can essentially check out the people or the books. You can check out a person for 30 minutes to visit and have a conversation. And that CNN article, I think they gave 3 or 4 examples. And it's just, I don't think it's not the answer to everything, but it's a great part of that puzzle. Living room conversations are doing small groups. They originally intended for small groups of neighbors would get together in a living room, and they have a format to talk about things like that. Bridge USA is designed for groups of college students. Braver Angels is set up for people who identify as blue or red. So I think there's a real hunger for that. I've been sitting in on some meetings that Elizabeth Doty has invited me to, where her emphasis is on business's role in depolarizing, because in the long run, polarization is not great for business. I mean, there are people who are in the polarization business but business in general. And this is where I think it's so fascinating, because when we think of sustainability, I think most people go to the environment, but a huge component of that, I think, is our our social structure. And we have, and a big part of democracy is how well do we, can we sustainably live together and not devolve into worst case scenarios.
And I did remember one thing I wanted to let everyone know. You're welcome to speak freely, jump into the conversation at any point. And if we hit, a lull, I'll try to call on people, and especially people who maybe haven't shared yet. But if you don't want to share, just leave yourself on mute, and I will. I won't call on you if you're just here to listen. So
it's a very open-ended conversation, so I'm not sure exactly where to hop in, but I'm going to pause for a moment because the person who's just joined us by phone was going to introduce themselves. So I'm going to hold off.
Hello, Gary Miller checking in.
Hey.
I-35 northbound, state of Texas, mile marker 483. Good to hear your voices. I'll go back on silent.
Oh, good to have you with us, Gary.
Good to hear your voice, Gary. So let's see. Something that I'm finding that is counterproductive right now within the current state of politics is the degree to which anger seems to be tapped more than ever and commoditized, right? In terms of shoring up political support for folks. If you can become a lightning rod, right, and maybe to channel that anger towards support of yourself, right? That for support for politicians, that does seem to be sort of the political upside of the polarization that's happening. You can create a fairly loyal base if you can become that sort of avatar for that anger with a certain group of people. I wonder, and I'll make some cross references here to Matthias. Back in the day, I was going to a Matthias session, and my question was kind of like, I'm not sure exactly how I can get beyond my anger for the former president at a certain point, right? I clearly can see I guess if anything, I consider myself an independent, but at least an anti-demagoguery person part. And so we talked about how you got to start somewhere, right? And the easiest way to start generating love for others is at least kind of going to where your love flows easiest, right? What's love what's easy to love, and then you can love what's harder to love over time. And so what I'm thinking about that is just, it's a reminder that it is a temporary thing, that all things can change over time, and that the state we find ourselves in right now is temporal. And I got some validation this week of that, because I see that there's sort of this white majority that's going to become our largest white minority here soon within this country, that's trying to sort of hang on for all it can, and subversively, right, from subverting democracy in fashion, right, to be able to kind of hold on and trench in. But I just hearing a Trevor Noah interview with Chris Christie was this kind of fascinating sort of opening up of a Republican standing up. I'm not sure that Chris Christie and I would find each other aligned with a number of issues, but what I can get around is more just kind of this presence he's bringing about to begin speaking the truth, right? This at least kind of, if nothing else, if we can't kind of find kind of agreements on anything else, we should at least get back to supporting facts, right? and supporting truth. I know truth can be subjective in our own minds depending on how much we understand the full equations going on around us, but at least some general semblance of truth, and stepping away from intentional falsehoods, right? To kind of bring some sanity back, at least to the Republican Party, as he's kind of thinking through that, and kind of level the playing field there in terms of just having that as kind of a common denominator. And so with that, I see sort of a breaking from the ranks in a way that is not necessarily pervasive across the party, but someone who feels like there is a kind of a base of the Republican Party he can kind of run with the support of, and at the same time too can bring kind of a healthier balance back to that part of the political system as well. So I guess for me, if anything, I'm just kind of doing this in an open-ended way to say I really get quite frustrated right now myself, angry at times with just how much of the system is being subverted currently to be able to hold on to power as best as possible, as a majority is slipping into a minority. And at the same time, though, I do see that pendulum, where it may have kind of hit its, hit the fullest portion of its swing, does seem to be swinging back in the next and towards a bit more of a balance, where you might find that part of the political infrastructure, political faction will always be there, but there is maybe kind of a swinging back towards some semblance of normalcy, if that makes sense, and away from some of the the stoking of the anger as the only way to kind of find your way into political office. So I'm encouraged by that to some degree. And again, it's only one piece of the larger equation of the conversation, but that to me was a crack in the overall kind of oftentimes kind of seems like a consolidated force, right? That otherwise is just kind of like on the crazy train somewhere. And again, it's a pejorative, right? That's probably not going to be very productive in terms of the four concepts we talked about with the Rotary, but it oftentimes feels like there are a number of folks riding the crazy train.
That's a really good discussion, Darren. Going off of what you're talking about with anger, I think that the basic thing that we need to get back to is talking about in upholding facts in politics and media and all of that stuff. And I think that's where a lot of anger comes from, where people are just, and politicians, certain ones, are just blatantly ignoring the facts that are being presented in like scientific studies and all of that stuff. At least particularly in my like bubble in social media, especially on Twitter and Reddit, there's a lot of anger towards the media for sugarcoating a lot of really important events, especially when it comes to police brutality and stuff like that. So there's a lot of anger with just truth, and right there's a lot of stuff to come back from there, and like politicians just not like, I don't have my thoughts together, I can't speak today, but politicians blatantly ignoring the truth is something that my part of social media has been really angry with lately.
I'm going to build and open it up into another area for conversation too, so we can bring the corporates in there as well. I have also topically this week heard, for the first instance, a secondhand of someone who wants to get engaged in sustainability, which is my professional world day to day, but has been primarily a marketer at heart, someone who's an entrepreneur, someone who's made been quite successful in their career financially over time, has made a pivot more full focused into sustainability, because two of his daughters, and they're young to mid-20s, have essentially said, by the way, you won't be having any grandchildren because we don't believe this is a world we want to bring kids into. And as I had heard from my mom and dad, as I caught up with them 2 nights ago, they were fortunate enough to have had breakfast with Ellie's older sister, Riley, and they had picked up with her, just in conversation that yeah, she said the same thing. All of a sudden, it comes to home to roost in my own family, kind of like it's not a time in which she really feels like it's comfortable to bring kids into this world. And so here's my tie into the corporate side. That again comes to truth. It comes towards maybe just maybe my anger also is seated in the manipulation of truth, right? I feel like that's there's one thing to kind of come forth with your beliefs and as you understand the world, right? Here's what I believe, and I may think that's not my truth, but recognize that that's someone else's truth. I feel like that's different than a manipulated truth for, I'll call it trenching in. It's the same thing on the corporate side. So let's talk about climate change, right? For decades, decades, back to, at least the 70s, if not before that, many of the folks in the fossil fuel industry, right? A lot of the petroleum companies have known and been aware of global warming, have been aware that they're contributing to it in a major way, but have poured money into politics through lobbying in such a way that it's kind of like a deflection and kind of a counterpoint as to, oh no, that's not really where we ought to be looking. There's no ties there. You can't scientifically prove that. And then even when you get to a point where we're at today, where you've got some companies, I'll take Shell as an example. They showed up at a recent the one that Elizabeth Doty attended our conference here within the last couple months. Shell Energy was one of the sponsors. It was the renewable energy arm of Shell. But at the same time, I had someone from Extinction Rebellion on stage. This young man from high school essentially stood up and called out Shell Energy and said, "I can't believe you've got Shell here as one of your sponsors." And again, at the crux of that is essentially you've got Shell, which actually, if you look at the petroleum players out there, has set a goal, a 2050 goal, to be at a point where they're net zero, which is, I can only name a couple who've gotten there, but they're slow rolling it right now. They're essentially saying we're going to get there, but maybe we're going to kind of get to a point by 2030 it's going to be okay, or by 2035. But over the next 5 to 6 to 7 years, it's not going to be a fast pace. And the problem is because they've engendered no trust in the past, because they have been a part of a deceptive lobbying movement as a whole, there's no trust that give them 5 more years of status quo, and 5 years from now, they're going to want to kick the can down the road another 5 years for another status quo. And it's like, folks, you've been manipulating the system to give yourselves 40 years of the status quo, where you should have been taking action well before that. So again, it just kind of comes down, my anger, I feel like more often than not, is seated in the manipulation of truth to be able to protect the position of affluence that you have as a company, the position of power that you have as a politician or a political base, the position of, it's just kind of the coercion of the truth in support of something that I find to be selfish. And then that tells you a lot about me, right? It tells you a little bit more about how this country, very much one of domination, created in terms of domination, as you found settlers coming in, is very much kind of a I'm in it for myself mentality for how the country is as a whole. Yet at the same time too, when you have the pioneers coming out west, you've also got the Amish barn raisings, right? I'll help you raise your barn if you help me raise my barn, and so on. So we're like this country of contradictions. Everyone's in it for themselves, but if I know you and you're close enough to me and your reality in my life day to day, I'll help you out because you're part of my tribe, if that makes sense. But it's so plenty to cover. I'm just spewing this morning, but those are like that's at the heart of what I find to be really maddening is manipulating the truth to keep what you've got and to hoard it for yourself. Damn, everything else be damned for the others around me, if that makes sense.
Well, if 80% of people believe that there's too much money in politics, that's an awfully big tribe.
It's a big tribe.
Yeah, absolutely. And the flip side to that is what 90% of them believe that there's nothing we can do about it. But
It's an even bigger tribe.
yeah.
I really appreciate everything you said, Darren, and this is going to both kind of talking about the anger that's out there, and also, you know, what you said about, you know, the tribe that we're in. I would like to for myself continue seeing, you know, the world as my tribe. Everyone here, you know, everyone out there is someone I can help and connect with. And I find that at least part of the anger out there is driven from kind of I think an insecurity, and especially that goes back to a kind of financial insecurity, or I guess a scarcity mindset. And so one thing I'm doing that I would like to do more of is I want to offer to, like, individuals. I want to say, I would like to help you create your happy level of income. You know, the amount of income where if you had it coming in consistently, you would feel you know, satisfied, taken care of, and like, you know, things are easy for you. You're not, you know, about to drop off a cliff or anything. And I would like to do that for free for people, because I'm, you know, I have, you know, I'm not to that point yet, but I have enough financial and emotional support that I can kind of act as if I have that. And so that's something I want to do for really anyone out there who wants to explore that. And I want to help them do it in a way that they want to receive it. Like, rather than bringing them a formula, I want to listen to them and, you know, hear, okay, what's the way that you want to create this income? And yeah, can I support you in that somehow? Can we find support systems for you to do that? Because I think, you know, a lot of people feel like they're sort of, I think, trapped in a world where they're financially insecure, and their only options are to do a bunch of stuff that they don't want to do, and or that they don't find meaningful or helpful. And so I want to change that in that way. And so thank you for letting me. Thank you for bringing something up for me to hop on there at the end.
I have a question on that. So this is the whole group. What are you all hearing in conversations about how people are feeling about their careers, their level of happiness, their satisfaction, and have you heard that a lot more people are reevaluating their you know, their position in the world, and based on what you were talking about, people deciding not to have children. What are you all hearing?
Well, I was going to do it privately, but I quit, Don. It's been a good run.
All right, we'll talk about that later.
Okay.
Is Don your boss?
Well, apparently, till just a minute ago, I was.
Okay, Gary.
I hear that, you know, nearly everyone received a mandatory don't get to choose cliff event to take a look at their career and their lives. And many, I don't know, I would say the people I talked to, at least more than half of them have said, it got me thinking I may want to do something a little different, whether it's different arrangement, working remotely like I'm doing, or people who said, I got to go do something else. Here's my resignation. I'd say more than half are contemplating some kind of fundamental change.
Anybody else?
I can say that the notion of not wanting kids, especially in this younger generation, I can say my last 3 partners have not wanted kids, and
Wow.
for that reason, they don't feel like they want to bring a kid into this world, especially its current trajectory. And I agree with that. And I'm not gonna say, oh, we should do that anyway. But and in terms of careers, my grandma, who's a nurse, recently retired from burnout, basically from COVID and everything. It just wore her out. And that, I mean, totally agree. Like, she's already 68, so it's not like she retired early or anything. But I also, a lot of professors are talking about law firms just completely going remote because they don't want to drive into the city every day. But yeah, those are some conversations I've heard.
So
The last 3 partners. Oh, I'm sorry, Anna. Forgive me.
Hi everyone. So from my experience, I would want to do the opposite. I want to bring children into the world to counteract all of these problems that are going to be coming in the future. And I think that more has to do with where I live and people finding happiness in having children and not their jobs. A lot of people work blue collar jobs and low paying jobs, but they find satisfaction in having families. And what I see in my generation is people wanting to change that. And they really want to live true to the saying, love what you do and do what you love, trying to make an impact in their jobs, which I'm really proud of our generation for wanting to do that now.
I agree.
Yeah, I love that, Anna. And I just wanted to let you know as well, like I told everyone at the beginning, we're talking about sustainability, and you can go with the flow of the conversation, but I also want to open it up to, feel free to bring up something, even if it's out of the flow of conversation. Feel free to start a new conversation or express what you are really excited to talk about at any time. And thank you for joining us.
My mind goes back to a friend of mine that I had in high school. It was an unusual friendship. I had moved to a small town in southeast Kansas, and as my dad had picked up a leadership role with the social rehabilitation service with the state, kind of helping out more on the social work side. The gal who had that job before he came in, who retired, her name is Pauline Flynn, and she lived at the end of my block in a trailer down at the corner. And I got to know her pretty quickly after we moved in, and I guess where I got my experience gardening. She was heavy set, couldn't get around all that well, certainly couldn't get around in the yard to the degree that she could when she was younger. And so I would go out and plant for her each spring, and I would go over and tend to them throughout the year, and then harvest in the fall for her, and do some errands for her as well. But it was kind of a good way to make a little extra money, as I was growing through my junior high and high school years. But at the same time, struck up a great friendship, and we get into deep conversations, and we were talking often as we'd be watching the news or something like that together, where I was too young to really be making much of an impact in the world when we kind of talked about all the things that were wrong, and she was too old. She'd been retired. She wasn't active professionally or active kind of within the world of politics or government any longer. So I guess I now sit here today, and I'm at that age and stage where I feel like I'm I'm in that middle point, right? I'm in a point of maybe greater influence, and I've got a few years to go before I'm out of the system. But it does seem like that's something I'm aware of, if that makes sense, right? I'm aware of the fact that of those conversations, they're still with me today, and that I need to be leveraging my time and my resources now, while I'm kind of in a period of life, right, where I can leverage more influence in a way that's true to that young man who was sitting there talking with Pauline all those years ago. And so in some ways that kind of keeps some of the true north there for me, kind of keeps me in tune with my younger, more idealistic days. I'm still an idealist, but at the same time, I think life over time has nailed down a great deal of pragmatism for me along the way too, and a ability to, I guess I've become not necessarily a fence mender, but in some ways kind of a go-between between several worlds, right? I can prompt one group that may not be doing enough to take steps forward, and I can to some degree alleviate some of the larger concerns that the other group has, that that action's not happening fast enough. I know where my true north lies, and it's not necessarily fully with one camp or another at this point in time, but at the same time, maybe there's that value in being the bridge, but a bridge that still stimulates on both sides. I don't know what that looks like in an analogy, but both uh, a go-between, but an inspirer as well, right? And trying to figure out what motivates each side, right, to take those steps. I think so often it comes down to language, right? There's a great book I can offer up around igniting conversations. It really just talks about how we're all oftentimes saying a lot of the same things, but we just talk right past each other because our receptors are different, right? And the way we vocalize it is different. The way we vocalize and the way we hear it is different. There's so much more commonality amongst what we're saying. It's just that how our frequency and what tunes we're picking up are just different. And the more you can, I'm just this kind of, I crave sort of like, let's keep peeling back the onion. What's really at the crux of all this, right? Where's that conversation starting? I hear what you say, but I feel like that's the byproduct of something that stimulated that, and something that stimulated that, and something that's okay. Here's the core issue that we're all trying to go after. And so hard, I think, these days, because we've evolved into a point where we all want to take what most conversation that happens, I find, is sticking to these kind of like talking points that the sides have kind of gravitated towards. It's like, let's keep digging down. Let's try getting down to kind of like what's really going on here. To your point, Zach, I'm thinking it's more like, is it financial insecurity that's kind of stimulating these kind of larger concerns? I once heard it say that any act of violence in many ways is kind of a defensive act, right? And or kind of a form of defense. And the question then becomes, all right, if that's the case, then what's what kind of protection what are you trying to kind of put up through any kind of any kind of overt aggravation or aggression? How about that? Aggression that's coming forward.
Thank you, Darren. And Mike, I was wondering if you might want to share more about money in politics, like you mentioned earlier.
Well, I just it's just ridiculous how much and with money with things. I guess it's not so much that money in politics is terrible; it's that inequality is terrible. The fact that the very, 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 very wealthy have so much money, and they're just throwing it around now. They're buying NFTs and what have you. No, if you don't know what that is, it's a one of a kind, and it's hard to describe, but it's a one of a kind piece of digital what have you that no one else can have. It's blockchain, and therefore you have the rights to say that I'm the one person in the whole world that has this. So they'll buy a freaking piece of like yesterday, I guess the script to, I guess that Quentin Tarantino took a PDF or made a Reservoir Dogs script into a NFT and sold it for, I don't know, $10 million or something. And somebody's got that now. And so money is just so easy to come by for the very, 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 very wealthy that they're just throwing it around. And they can throw 10, 20, 30 million dollars at an election if they want. And that outsized influence that comes along with that can be so destructive. And I just worry also about how it interacts with social media and how it can be leveraged to further inflame people on one side or the other. And the power of money in politics is unchecked and it is destructive. And I think everybody agrees that, or 80%, 90% of people, depending on what you look at, say there's way too much, but there's nothing we can do about it. Well, I refuse to believe that. That's what I have.
Yeah. Thank you, Mike. For me, that's one of the things when we talk about, as we start digging down, like you're talking about, Darren, the money in politics is definitely something that we find as maybe it's not the very deepest root, but it's a root that goes really deep.
I'd say it's the deepest root.
And
my opinion, though.
Certainly.
I would have to agree with Mike. I've come to that realization over time. I just threw a couple things in the chat, some interesting things that might help, if some links to different things, the history of the four-way test, and then a couple articles about application of the four-way test in the post-truth era. So it's kind of interesting that Rotary has their finger on the pulse of a lot of these issues. But I also threw a link in there just a second ago. There's a conglomeration of folks who have developed this website called Our Common Purpose. It was a 2-year study that the American Academy of Arts and Sciences did with a number of scholars, and they basically kind of dove into what's wrong with this country and did 2 years worth of interviewing people all over the country, from urban and rural and all at every demographic. And they came up with 31 recommendations. And it's some heavy, deep stuff, but I would highly recommend it. Every time I look at it, I learn something new. And one of their recommendations is a constitutional amendment to address money in politics. They looked at every possible combination, and they're not saying that that's the only solution, but they're saying that that's an integral part of it. So if y'all get a chance, I think it would. A lot of what we talk about in Democracy in a Box goes back to the American experiment. Is it time to call it quits, or do we want to keep trying? There was a survey in there that's something about over 40% of people that they surveyed were open to some form of government other than democracy, whether it be more more leaning toward socialism or more leaning toward an authoritarian type government. And maybe I'm old-fashioned, but I'm not ready to give up on democracy yet. And there was an interesting speech the other day that Joe Biden gave, talking about conversations he was having with world leaders, and their opinion was, and this was Xi of China and Putin and some other presidents for life, or autocrats, let's say, and they were saying that pretty much democracy was not nimble enough, or the democracies currently were not nimble enough to address the issues that we face in the world. And I think that's kind of a wake-up call. You know, do we want to stick with democracy, or do we want to move toward autocracy? And that's kind of how he framed it. That's the, you know, it's easy to say, well, if enough of us don't participate, it's easy to say, well, you know, I just could trust this one person to do everything in my best interest. But I think most people, if you, like you were saying, if you dive deeper and ask, okay, would you be willing to give up all these freedoms in return for more order, and also not having a say in how the country was run? That's where I think democracy is hard. And I was having a number of conversations over the last 2 weeks, and the one common thread that kept coming back was that we need more education, whether it's talking about sustainability, or whether it's talking about civic engagement. To a person, they were saying, when we finally got down to, okay, what's the solution? They all said, we need better education. And I know that education is a big topic of debate in just about every city in this country, and every little town. You know, how much public education do we have versus private education, and what are we teaching? And then there's all sorts of arguments over the, you know, does the federal government have too much power, and how much power should be left to the local level? But I think we keep getting back to, you know, how do we find a common truth and a common language? So I just echoing what all of you've said, I think, you know, I think a common language, or on an individual level, being able to build up a callus, so to speak, when you're having interactions with other people. And like our friend Elizabeth has said, you know, go deeper, not louder, which is hard, but with proper training, I think we can break that cycle.
Don, I'm going to send you a political cartoon that's been on my mind a lot and continues to come up, especially as I hear what we've been talking about here along the way. And you can decide whether or not, I'll let you vet it first before we want to share it with the group. I just emailed it to you. Right. And I also noticed that share screen is not an option currently within the group. But what I find about that is, Mike, is it speaks to the influence of money, right, in our political system as well, and so much of the real source of the polarization that's going on. It wraps it all up in a single image for me that has just stuck with me ever since I've seen it. I see a lot of political cartoons, but this one is like, just that you could kind of find, 12 different insights you could draw out of this sort of single image in and of itself. So as I speak to that, Don, have you seen it? Is it something that you've passes the filter that can be shared?
Yeah, I think let's I'd say in order to be totally nonpartisan and totally
That would be a no.
bipartisan, let's, I agree with it, but let's.
Okay, we can keep it to the side. Got
Yeah.
it. Thanks.
But but on that, can I jump in? I think, between social media and mainstream media, besides the fact that it's been sliced and diced so that we all can consume only what we agree with. And then now we found out through quite a few revelations about Facebook that the algorithms are actually, not only giving us only what we want, but in some ways pushing us in one direction or the other. And I think this is unprecedented. And I think a lot of times, most of us are so busy with our lives, we don't really even stop to think about, are we being manipulated? And this kind of goes back to the discussion about going, asking a question or two about, is this the truth? And it takes energy to fact check. And one of the things that really early on, conversations with my brother Steve, who's the president of our Rotary Club, he started doing, just on a personal level, he refused to forward anything he received, either a text or an email or a cartoon, until he had run it through the 4-way test. And he didn't ask anybody else to do that, but he said it was really amazing how many times he saw something, and then he would go back to his friend who had sent it to him and said, do you know the source of this, or what? And then he would, and a lot of times, because it was someone who was already his friend, who was a trusted individual, they had a really interesting conversation and a really good conversation. And a lot of times he said, oh, I didn't realize that. I'm so sorry. I'm going to be more, he wasn't telling them to be more careful. He was just saying, I won't pass this on unless I know it's the truth. And that's kind of what I like about the 4-way test, that it's not saying we want you to be this way, because that's, most people, you start telling them how they should act, and they say, oh, who are you to tell me? No, this is how I conduct myself. And a lot of times he would find that by the time he got to that second question, it's like, well, I can't absolutely verify the accuracy of this, so I'm not going to pass it on. Or one of the things we're doing with money in politics is asking people to take a look at our current political funding system, like what Mike said. It's the fact that about 1,200 people in this country are account for like 90% of the financing. Well, that I think that fails the second question. Is it fair to all concerned? So I find myself using that a lot. It's rather than trying to overthink something, I start running it through that test.
Thank you, Don, and thank you, everyone. And as we approach the end of our hour here, I just wanted to jump in and say, if anyone has something that they haven't shared yet that they would really like to share, feel free to jump in. And also, we'll stay on, or I'll stay on past the hour, but don't feel like you're trapped if you need to go, or if you want to hop off. And I just wanted to throw that little update in.
I'm going to get going, but thanks everyone. This was great. I'll see you all again, hopefully.
Thank you,
Pleasure to be
Mike.
with
And I just wanted to
all of
jump
you,
in.
including Mike.
We're going to do this. This is going to be a continuing discussion. So our next one will be December 4th. Same time, same Zoom link. So we're going to keep it easy.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you
you,
all.
Mike.
Bye, guys.
Thank you, Darren.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.